The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Kensington Palace as Sergeant Michael Thompson adjusted his red tunic for what he thought would be another routine day of royal duty. At 42 years old, Michael had served the Royal Guard for nearly 2 decades, standing sentinel at countless ceremonies, state visits, and royal engagements. His weathered hands bore the calluses of a man who had dedicated his life to service, first in the British Army overseas, then in the prestigious role of protecting the royal family. Michael's morning began like any other. He arrived at the palace gates at dawn, his polished boots clicking against the pavement as he made his way to the guardhouse. The other guards greeted him with familiar nods and brief exchanges about the weather or weekend football matches. But beneath Michael's professional exterior lay a heavy burden that had been growing heavier with each passing week. 3 months earlier, Michael had received news that would shake any parent to their core. His 8-year-old daughter, Emma, had been diagnosed with a rare form of childhood leukemia. The doctors had explained the treatment options with clinical precision, but the words seemed to blur together as Michael struggled to comprehend how his bright, energetic little girl could be facing such a serious illness. Emma had always been the light of Michael's life. After his divorce 2 years prior, she had become his anchor, the reason he pushed through difficult days and found joy in simple moments. Their weekend visits to the park, her excited chatter about school friends, and her infectious laughter had been the highlights of his week. Now, those precious moments were overshadowed by hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights spent worrying about her future. The financial strain was becoming unbearable. Michael's salary as a royal guard, while respectable, was hardly enough to cover the mounting medical expenses that weren't fully covered by the NHS. Emma needed specialized treatments, experimental medications, and constant care that required his ex-wife Sarah to take time off work. The stress was affecting everyone, and Michael found himself working extra shifts whenever possible, trying to make ends meet while being present for his daughter. On this particular morning, Michael had just returned from spending the night at the hospital. Emma had been admitted for another round of treatment, and the sight of her small frame connected to various machines had left him emotionally drained. He had barely slept, choosing instead to sit by her bedside, holding her hand and reading her favorite stories until the early hours of the morning. As he took his position at the palace entrance, Michael tried to push aside his personal worries and focus on his duties. The royal family was expecting several official visitors that day, and protocol demanded his complete attention. He straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin, and assumed the stoic expression that had become second nature over his years of service. The morning passed quietly, with only a few tourists snapping photos from a respectful distance. Michael's mind wandered occasionally to Emma, wondering how she was feeling and whether the new medication was helping. His phone, tucked discreetly in his pocket, remained silent, which he hoped was a good sign. Around midday, activity around the palace began to increase. Palace staff moved with purpose through the corridors, preparing for the afternoon's schedule. Michael had been briefed that the young Prince George, now 11 years old, would be participating in a small ceremony in the main courtyard. It was meant to be a learning experience for the future king, allowing him to observe and participate in royal duties under the careful guidance of his tutors and security detail. Prince George had grown considerably since Michael had first seen him as a toddler. The young prince carried himself with a natural dignity that seemed beyond his years. Yet he retained the curiosity and warmth that made him genuinely likable to those who worked around the palace. Michael had observed him from a distance on numerous occasions, noting how the boy treated everyone with kindness and respect, from senior palace officials to the cleaning staff. As the afternoon ceremony approached, Michael was assigned to stand guard near the main entrance to the courtyard. His role was to maintain security while remaining as unobtrusive as possible, allowing the young prince to conduct his duties without distraction. The ceremony itself was relatively simple, involving the presentation of awards to several charity workers who had made significant contributions to children's healthcare initiatives. Standing at attention, Michael watched as Prince George listened intently to each recipient's story, asking thoughtful questions and expressing genuine interest in their work. The boy's maturity was remarkable, and Michael found himself impressed by the prince's ability to connect with people despite his young age. During a brief intermission in the ceremony, something unexpected happened. Prince George, while chatting with his aide, noticed Michael standing nearby. The prince's gaze lingered for a moment, and Michael felt a flicker of concern. Had he done something wrong? Was his posture not perfect? Had his exhaustion from the sleepless night at the hospital somehow shown through his professional facade? But instead of looking away or simply acknowledging his presence with a nod, Prince George did something that caught Michael completely off guard. The young prince walked over to where Michael stood, his expression gentle and curious rather than formal. "Excuse me," Prince George said quietly, his voice carrying the polished accent of his upbringing, but with a warmth that seemed entirely genuine. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but you seem troubled today. Is everything all right?" Michael was stunned. In all his years of service, no member of the royal family had ever approached him so directly or shown such personal interest in his well-being. The question, asked with such sincere concern by an 11-year-old boy, caught him completely unprepared. For a moment, Michael struggled to respond. Protocol dictated that he should give a brief, professional answer and redirect attention away from himself. But something in Prince George's eyes, a genuine compassion that seemed far beyond his years, made Michael hesitate. "Thank you for asking, Your Highness," Michael managed, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "I'm quite well, sir. Thank you for your concern." But Prince George didn't simply accept the polite deflection. Instead, he stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice so their conversation wouldn't be overheard by others nearby. "My grandmother always says that when someone is carrying a heavy burden, it shows in their eyes," the prince said softly. "You have kind eyes, but they look very sad today. If there's anything troubling you, perhaps talking about it might help." Michael felt his carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. The unexpected kindness from this young boy, combined with the emotional exhaustion of the past few months, created a perfect storm of vulnerability. He glanced around nervously, aware that several palace staff members were watching the interaction with interest. "Your Highness, you're very kind to ask, but I shouldn't—" Michael began, but Prince George raised a small hand to gently interrupt. "Please," the prince said simply. "Sometimes helping others helps us too, and I think you might need someone to listen right now." The sincerity in those words, spoken by a child who would one day be king, broke through Michael's professional barriers entirely. Despite every instinct telling him to maintain proper protocol, he found himself speaking from the heart. "My daughter," Michael said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's very ill, Your Highness. The doctors are doing everything they can, but—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence without risking an emotional breakdown in the middle of his duty. Prince George's expression immediately softened with understanding and compassion. For a moment, the 11-year-old boy looked older than his years, as if he instinctively understood the weight of a parent's fear and love. "I'm so sorry to hear that," Prince George said genuinely. "What's her name?" "Emma," Michael replied, surprised by how natural it felt to share this personal detail with the young prince. "She's 8 years old, and she's the bravest person I know." "Emma," Prince George repeated thoughtfully, as if committing the name to memory. "She sounds wonderful, and I'm sure she gets her bravery from her father." The simple kindness of that statement nearly undid Michael completely. He blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that threatened to fall despite his best efforts to maintain composure. "Thank you, Your Highness," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know." Prince George nodded solemnly, then did something that would remain etched in Michael's memory forever. The young prince reached out and gently touched Michael's arm, a gesture of comfort and support that transcended all boundaries of protocol and rank. "I'll remember Emma in my prayers tonight," Prince George said quietly. "And if there's ever anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. That's not just a prince speaking to a guard. That's one person who cares about another." Before Michael could respond, Prince George's aide approached to inform him that the ceremony was ready to resume. The prince gave Michael one last compassionate look before returning to his duties, leaving the guard standing alone with a heart full of unexpected hope and gratitude. As Michael watched Prince George resume his role in the ceremony, he marveled at what had just occurred. In a world where protocol and formality usually governed every interaction, this young boy had shown him genuine human compassion. The prince hadn't offered empty platitudes or distant sympathy. Instead, he had taken the time to truly see Michael as a person, to acknowledge his pain, and to offer comfort in the most sincere way possible. For the first time in months, Michael felt something other than despair about his situation. The financial pressures were still there, the medical challenges hadn't changed, and Emma's condition remained serious. But somehow, the simple act of being seen and understood by this remarkable young boy had given him a renewed sense of strength. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur for Michael. He maintained his professional duties, but his mind kept returning to Prince George's words and the genuine care the boy had shown. As the afternoon drew to a close and the official visitors departed, Michael found himself looking forward to his evening visit with Emma. For the first time in weeks, he had a story that might bring a smile to her face. That evening, as Michael sat beside Emma's hospital bed, he told her about his encounter with Prince George. Emma's eyes lit up with wonder as she listened to the story, asking excited questions about the prince and the palace. "He really said he'd pray for me?" Emma asked, her voice weak but filled with amazement. "He did," Michael confirmed, smoothing her hair gently. "And he meant it too. I could tell." "Daddy," Emma said thoughtfully, "he sounds like a really good person. I hope I get to meet him someday." "Maybe you will, sweetheart," Michael replied, though he knew such an encounter was unlikely given their circumstances. As Emma drifted off to sleep that night, Michael reflected on the day's events. He had no idea that this brief moment of human connection was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would change not only his own life, but also demonstrate the profound impact that genuine compassion can have on the world. Little did Michael know that Prince George had been just as affected by their conversation as he had been, and that the young prince was already considering how he might be able to help the brave guard and his daughter in ways that went far beyond simple prayers. The conversation with Sergeant Thompson had deeply affected Prince George in ways that surprised even his closest advisors. That evening, as he sat in his private study completing his homework assignments, the young prince found his thoughts continually returning to the guard's anguished expression and the pain he had seen in the man's eyes when he spoke about his daughter Emma. Prince George had always been taught about duty, responsibility, and service to others, but his encounter with Michael had made these concepts feel more real and immediate than any lesson or lecture ever could. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to protecting the royal family. Yet he was facing a personal crisis that threatened to overwhelm him. The injustice of the situation troubled the 11-year-old deeply. Unable to concentrate on his studies, Prince George approached his private secretary, Ms. Adelaide Morton, who had been with the family for several years and had earned his trust through her genuine care and understanding. "Ms. Morton," Prince George said thoughtfully, "I need to ask you about something important." Adelaide looked up from her correspondence, immediately noting the serious tone in the prince's voice. She had learned to recognize when the young royal was grappling with something significant, and she gave him her full attention. "Of course, Your Highness. What's troubling you?" Prince George recounted his conversation with Sergeant Thompson, being careful not to betray any confidences while explaining his desire to help. Adelaide listened carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned as she learned about Emma's condition and the family's struggles. "Your compassion does you great credit, Your Highness," Adelaide said when he finished. "But you understand that there are protocols and procedures that must be followed in situations like this." "I know about protocols," Prince George replied with a maturity that sometimes startled those around him. "But surely there must be something we can do. This man has served our family faithfully for years, and his daughter is seriously ill. Isn't helping people in need exactly what being royal should mean?" Adelaide was struck by the prince's reasoning. In her years of royal service, she had seen many members of the family struggle with the balance between public duty and personal compassion. But rarely had she encountered someone so young who grasped the fundamental purpose of royal responsibility so clearly. "Let me make some discreet inquiries," Adelaide said carefully. "There may be charitable foundations or resources available that could provide assistance, but we must be very careful about how we proceed." Over the next few days, Adelaide worked quietly behind the scenes, researching options and consulting with trusted contacts in various charitable organizations. Meanwhile, Prince George found himself thinking about Emma Thompson constantly. He imagined what it would be like to be 8 years old and facing such a frightening illness, what it would feel like to see his parents struggling and worried all the time. During his regular lessons with his tutor, Mr. James Richardson, Prince George brought up the topic of childhood illness and medical care in Britain. Mr. Richardson, an experienced educator who had worked with the royal family for over a decade, recognized the prince's genuine interest and encouraged the discussion. "Healthcare is indeed one of the most important issues facing families in our country, Your Highness," Mr. Richardson explained. "While the NHS provides excellent care, there are still many families who face significant challenges, especially when dealing with rare or complex conditions." "What about families where the children need special treatments or experimental medicines?" Prince George asked, thinking specifically about Emma's situation. "Those cases can be particularly difficult," Mr. Richardson admitted. "Sometimes the costs can be overwhelming, even for families with steady incomes. It's one of the reasons why charitable organizations and foundations play such an important role in our society." This conversation gave Prince George an idea. That afternoon, he approached his father, Prince William, requesting a private meeting. William, who had always encouraged his children to think seriously about their roles and responsibilities, was happy to sit down with his eldest son. "Dad," Prince George began, "I've been learning about families who struggle with medical expenses when their children are seriously ill. I met someone recently who's facing exactly this situation, and I keep thinking there must be something we can do to help." Prince William listened carefully as his son explained the situation, being struck by the boy's genuine concern and his thoughtful approach to the problem. He was proud to see that George was developing a real understanding of how the royal family could use their position to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. "You're absolutely right to be thinking about this, George," William said. "Our family has a long tradition of supporting healthcare causes, particularly those involving children. Your great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, was passionate about children's charities, and your grandmother Diana worked tirelessly to bring attention to various health issues. So there are ways we can help?" Prince George asked hopefully. "There are," William confirmed. "But we need to be thoughtful about how we proceed. Direct financial assistance isn't always the most appropriate approach, but there are other ways we can make a significant impact." Father and son spent the next hour discussing various possibilities. William explained how the royal family typically worked through established charitable foundations and organizations, how they could bring attention to important causes through their public platform, and how sometimes the most powerful thing they could offer was simply their time and genuine interest. Meanwhile, Adelaide's discreet inquiries had begun to bear fruit. She had contacted several children's health charities and discovered that there were indeed programs designed to help families facing extraordinary medical expenses. However, many of these programs had long waiting lists and complex application processes that could take months to navigate. She also learned more about Emma Thompson's specific condition and treatment needs. The experimental medication that offered the best hope for Emma's recovery was indeed expensive and not fully covered by standard healthcare provisions. The family was facing potential costs of tens of thousands of pounds over the course of her treatment. 3 days after his conversation with Prince William, Prince George received some encouraging news. Adelaide had arranged for him to meet with Sir Charles Whitmore, the chairman of the Royal Children's Health Foundation, one of the organizations that the royal family had supported for many years. Sir Charles, a distinguished gentleman in his 60s who had dedicated much of his career to children's health care advocacy, was immediately impressed by Prince George's knowledge and genuine passion for the cause. "Your Highness," Sir Charles said during their meeting, "it's remarkable to meet someone so young who understands the real challenges that families face in these situations. Most people don't realize how devastating the financial burden can be, even when a family has insurance or access to NHS care. I'm learning that there's often a big gap between what's available and what families actually need," Prince George replied thoughtfully, "especially when children need treatments that are new or experimental." "Exactly," Sir Charles confirmed. "And that's where organizations like ours try to step in. We have an emergency assistance program designed specifically for situations like the one you've described. If this family meets our criteria, we may be able to provide immediate support while they navigate the longer-term challenges." Prince George felt a surge of hope and excitement. How quickly could something like that happen? "If you can provide me with the family's details, I can have our team review their case within 48 hours, Sir Charles promised. "Given your personal interest in this situation, I'll make sure it receives priority attention." That evening, Prince George approached Michael Thompson as the guard was finishing his shift. Michael was surprised to see the prince again, but pleased by the continued kindness the boy had shown him. "Sergeant Thompson," Prince George said quietly, "I hope you don't mind, but I've been thinking about your daughter Emma and your family's situation. I've been talking to some people about ways that might be available to help." Michael felt a mixture of gratitude and concern. While he appreciated the prince's interest, he worried about being perceived as taking advantage of his position or seeking special treatment. "Your Highness, that's incredibly kind of you, but I couldn't ask for special consideration. There are proper channels and procedures that should be followed." "I completely understand your concerns," Prince George replied with wisdom beyond his years. "And I want to assure you that everything would be handled through proper charitable organizations and established programs. There would be no special treatment involved, just connecting your family with resources that are already available but not always easy to find." Prince George then explained about the Royal Children's Health Foundation and their emergency assistance program. He carefully emphasized that the foundation regularly helped families in similar situations and that there would be no publicity or attention drawn to their case. "The only thing I would ask," Prince George continued, "is for permission to share your contact information with the foundation so they can reach out to you directly. Everything after that would be handled through normal channels." Michael was overwhelmed by the prince's thoughtfulness and the practical way he had approached the situation. After a moment of consideration, he nodded gratefully. "Your Highness, I can't tell you how much this means to me and my family. If there are legitimate programs that might be able to help Emma, then yes, I would be very grateful for that connection." Prince George smiled genuinely for the first time since their initial conversation. "I'll arrange for someone from the Foundation to contact you tomorrow, and Sergeant Thompson, please know that this comes with no expectations or obligations. The Foundation helps families because it's the right thing to do, not because of any connection to the royal family." True to his word, the next day Michael received a call from the Royal Children's Health Foundation. The representative who contacted him, Mrs. Sarah Collins, was professional, compassionate, and remarkably well informed about Emma's specific medical needs. "Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Collins explained, "we've reviewed the preliminary information about your daughter's case, and it appears that she would qualify for our emergency medical assistance program. This program is designed specifically to help families facing extraordinary costs related to childhood illness treatments." Michael listened in amazement as Mrs. Collins outlined the various forms of assistance that might be available. The Foundation could potentially cover the costs of Emma's experimental medication for up to 12 months, provide transportation vouchers for hospital visits, and even offer counseling support for the entire family during the treatment period. "The process is quite straightforward," Mrs. Collins continued. "We'll need some medical documentation from Emma's doctors and financial information from you and your ex-wife, but we can often have assistance in place within 2 weeks of receiving completed applications." "I don't know what to say," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "This could change everything for our family." "That's exactly what we hope to achieve, Mr. Thompson. No child should have to go without proper medical care because of financial constraints, and no parent should have to choose between their child's health and their family's financial stability." That evening, Michael shared the incredible news with his ex-wife Sarah and with Emma herself. Emma, despite her illness and the exhaustion from her treatments, was fascinated by the story of how Prince George had taken such a personal interest in helping her family. "Daddy, do you think I could write him a thank you letter?" Emma asked from her hospital bed. "I think that would be a wonderful idea, sweetheart," Michael replied, his heart full of gratitude and hope for the first time in months. As Emma began composing her letter in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, Michael reflected on the extraordinary kindness that had been shown to his family. A chance encounter with a young prince had led to practical, life-changing assistance that would allow Emma to receive the best possible care without destroying their family financially. But perhaps more importantly, it had shown him that compassion and genuine human connection could exist even in the most formal and protocol-driven environments. Prince George had seen him not just as a guard or a servant, but as a father facing an unimaginable challenge, and he had responded with the kind of empathy and action that Michael would remember for the rest of his life. The Foundation's assistance would indeed prove to be transformative for the Thompson family, but the story was far from over. Prince George's gentle action had set in motion a series of events that would ultimately touch many more lives and demonstrate the profound impact that one person's compassion can have on the world around them. 6 months after their first encounter, Prince George received a letter that would profoundly impact his understanding of service and leadership. Written in careful, colorful handwriting on paper, decorated with small drawings of flowers and rainbows, Emma Thompson's thank you letter was unlike any correspondence the young prince had ever received. "Dear Prince George," the letter began, "my daddy told me that you helped our family when I was very sick. The doctors say I'm getting much better now, and my hair is starting to grow back after the chemotherapy. I wanted to thank you for being so kind to my daddy and for helping us get the medicine I needed. My daddy says you have a very important job being a prince, but you still took time to care about our family. That makes you a real hero to me." Emma had included a small drawing of herself and Prince George standing together outside what she imagined the palace looked like, both of them smiling and surrounded by hearts and flowers. At the bottom of the page, she had written, "I hope we can be friends someday." Prince George read the letter several times, each reading deepening his appreciation for the impact that his simple act of compassion had achieved. Through Adelaide's discreet updates, he had learned that Emma's treatment was progressing well and that the family's financial stress had been dramatically reduced thanks to the Foundation's support. But seeing Emma's own words, her joy and gratitude expressed in such an innocent and heartfelt way, made the success feel real in a way that no official report could have accomplished. That afternoon, Prince George approached his father with a request that would surprise even Prince William. "Dad, I've been thinking about what happened with Sergeant Thompson and his daughter Emma," George said thoughtfully. "The Foundation was able to help them, which is wonderful, but I keep wondering how many other families are facing similar struggles without any way to get help." Prince William nodded, recognizing the thoughtful expression that appeared on his son's face when he was working through a complex problem. "It's a fair question, George. Unfortunately, there are probably hundreds of families in similar situations at any given time." "That's what I thought," George replied. "And it seems to me that we could do something more systematic about it. What if we found a way to identify these families earlier and connect them with resources before they reach crisis points?" Prince William was impressed by his son's strategic thinking. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, I've been talking to Sir Charles about how the Foundation works, and it seems like one of the biggest problems is that families often don't know these programs exist until they're already in desperate situations. What if we could work with hospitals and doctors to make sure families learned about available resources as soon as they received difficult diagnoses?" The conversation that followed would eventually lead to the creation of what became known as the Early Support Initiative, a program designed to connect families facing childhood illness with appropriate resources and support services from the very beginning of their medical journey. But first, Prince George wanted to do something more personal. He asked Adelaide to arrange for him to meet Emma Thompson in person, if her health permitted and her family was comfortable with the idea. When Michael received the invitation for Emma to meet Prince George at the palace, he was overwhelmed with gratitude and excitement. Emma, who was indeed responding well to her treatment and had regained much of her energy and enthusiasm, was absolutely thrilled at the prospect of meeting her hero prince in person. The meeting was arranged for a quiet afternoon when the palace had no official events scheduled. Emma, wearing her favorite dress and a colorful headscarf that covered her still-growing hair, arrived at the palace holding tightly to both her parents' hands. Prince George met them in one of the palace's smaller, more informal sitting rooms, a space that felt warm and welcoming rather than intimidating. When Emma first saw the prince, she was initially shy, hiding behind her father's legs. But Prince George's gentle manner and genuine interest in getting to know her quickly put her at ease. "Emma, I'm so happy to finally meet you," Prince George said, kneeling down to be at her eye level. "I've been thinking about you a lot, and I'm so glad to hear that you're feeling better." "Thank you for helping my family," Emma replied softly, then added with growing confidence, "My daddy says you're going to be king someday." "That's true," Prince George replied with a smile. "But right now, I'm just a boy who thinks you're very brave and wanted to meet you." Emma giggled at this, charmed by the prince's modest response. Over the next hour, they talked about her favorite books, her love of drawing, her pet goldfish named Bubbles, and her hopes of becoming a doctor when she grew up so she could help other sick children. Prince George was genuinely fascinated by Emma's perspective and her resilience. Despite everything she had been through, she remained optimistic and kind, more concerned about other children who were still fighting their illnesses than about her own past struggles. "Prince George," Emma said seriously during their conversation, "there's a little boy in the hospital named Jamie who doesn't have any visitors. His family lives very far away. Do you think maybe you could send him a card or something? I think it would make him really happy." This simple request from an 8-year-old girl would spark another idea in Prince George's mind. If Emma, who had faced such serious challenges herself, was thinking about how to help other children in similar situations, then perhaps there was an opportunity to create something more comprehensive. Over the following weeks, Prince George worked with Sir Charles and the Royal Children's Health Foundation to develop what would become the Young Heroes Initiative. The program was designed to connect children who were recovering from serious illnesses with those who were just beginning their treatment journeys, creating a support network of young people who truly understood what each other was going through. Emma Thompson became one of the first participants in the program, writing letters and recording video messages for other children facing similar diagnoses. Her natural empathy and positive attitude made her an inspiring mentor figure, and her involvement helped other children feel less alone and more hopeful about their own recoveries. But the most significant development came 6 months later, when Prince George made an announcement that surprised the entire royal establishment. During a small ceremony at the palace, he declared his intention to dedicate a significant portion of his future royal duties to children's healthcare advocacy. "I've learned that being royal isn't about living in palaces or wearing crowns," Prince George said during the ceremony, with Emma Thompson and several other children from the foundation sitting in the front row. "It's about using whatever advantages you have to help people who need help. These children and their families have taught me what real courage looks like, and they've shown me what true service means." The ceremony marked the official launch of the Prince George Children's Health Initiative, a comprehensive program that would eventually help thousands of families navigate the complex challenges of childhood illness. The initiative included early intervention programs, family support services, research funding for rare childhood diseases, and advocacy for improved healthcare policies. Sergeant Michael Thompson, watching from his position as head of the prince's personal security detail, a promotion he had received in recognition of his years of dedicated service, felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. His chance encounter with a compassionate young prince had not only saved his daughter's life and transformed his family's circumstances, but had also contributed to the creation of something that would help countless other families facing similar challenges. Emma, now healthy and thriving, had indeed become friends with Prince George, corresponding regularly and meeting with him several times a year to discuss the initiative's progress. Her dream of becoming a doctor remained strong, and Prince George had promised to support her educational journey in whatever way he could. The story of Prince George's gentle action had proven that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest acts of human compassion. A young prince's willingness to see beyond protocol and connect with a struggling father had created ripple effects that would touch thousands of lives and establish a new model for how royal service could make a real difference in the modern world. Years later, when historians would write about Prince George's early development as a future king, many would point to this period as the moment when he truly understood his role and responsibility. But for those who were there, particularly Michael Thompson and his daughter Emma, the story was simpler and more profound than any historical analysis could capture. It was the story of a young boy who chose to care about a stranger's pain, and in doing so, discovered that true leadership isn't about commanding others, but about serving them. It was proof that kindness, when combined with action and sustained commitment, can indeed change the world, one family at a time. Michael Thompson never did walk away from his duties as a royal guard. Instead, he found a renewed sense of purpose in his service, knowing that he was protecting a family that had shown his own family extraordinary compassion when they needed it most. And every day, as he stood at his post, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the most important moments in life come not from grand gestures or official ceremonies, but from quiet conversations between two people who choose to see each other's humanity. The guard had chosen not to walk away, but to walk forward into a future brightened by the gentle action of a prince who understood that true royalty lies not in privilege, but in service to others.